Good evening.
Evening, Carrie.
Nice to,
Evening.
good
Right.
evening. Nice to see everybody, and thank you to everybody attending that I can't see. So tonight's webinar, hosted by me and along with my um, fellow associate and members, is all about autism and pet bereavement. I really wanted to do this topic because, as colleagues know, but others watching may not, I am autistic. I'm late diagnosed autistic, and I wanted to cover how autism and grief may differ from holistic or non-autistic grief or neurotypical grief. And I've done a bit of, I can only speak for myself as an autistic person because obviously autism is a spectrum, and if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. All we share really is the diagnosis, where there's so much more to autism than we're all very different. We all have our different struggles and ways of coping with things, and so we're all as individual as possible. So I wanted to talk about how grief in autistic individuals may present and what we can be doing to help people. So yeah, so I've been doing a bit of research just to make sure that what I was thinking, from, like I said, I can only speak for myself and how I personally have handled grief and experienced it. But I wanted to just do a bit of research and just make sure that just see what was going on for others. So I've got quite a few resources that I found that I feel would be quite beneficial, maybe for members to have a look at in their own time, and get to know these things. So let's see. So I suppose, like, first up, I had a look at the National Autistic Society here in the UK, and I just looked up, how might how might bereavement affect somebody with autism, or how somebody who's autistic. And to be honest, when you're reading through these descriptors to how grief may affect somebody who is autistic, you may look at it and think, well, that just sounds like grief to me. Things like anger. So it's say here, like anger, feeling more restless than usual, sleeping differently, eating differently, feeling that you need more help from others. And so might think, well, yeah, that just sounds, like grief. That's, so why is it different? And it's different because of how that affects that particular individual. So, for instance, you may find that there is a reduction, or like skills regression almost, that some people may find that they need more support to do things that they would normally be able to do on their own or with relative ease, and may feel that they need more support, more guidance, more explanations, and to help with just general activities that they may not normally not need any further support with. May feel more restless than usual. You may notice like an increase in stimming or self-soothing behaviours, and you might also notice, in speaking as an autistic person, like this is for other autistic, you may notice that you might not feel sad or grief as such, and that might be something that others don't expect. They may expect you to feel upset and to show upset and to be sad, but you may not want to. You may not actually feel that way. You may feel completely different. That's not to say that you don't miss your companion and you're not upset that they've gone. It may just be that you're expressing it differently. Or you may feel the grief and sadness after other people around you have expressed theirs. Again, you may feel more angry or more irritable, and you might find it hard to express how you feel with other people. I know that I struggle sometimes to name the feeling or what's going on internally. So tools such as like the I'm just looking up here, I've got the emotion sensation wheel and emotion behavior wheel, which are really good if a client is struggling to describe how they're actually feeling. It breaks it down to further, deepens the explanations further, so it's easier for a client to explain where they're at. They could just, if they can't speak in that moment, they could just point to whatever they've read and felt matched. I think it's important to bear in mind that autistic people may not express that. So as I've said, autistic people may not express their grief in a way that you would expect. But grief is as individual as a person experiencing it. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just however you as the individual feels. But don't assume that no outward expression of sadness or grief means that there is no pain and there is no grief or sadness. Just because somebody isn't expressing it in a way that is the norm to you or what you would recognize as such doesn't necessarily mean that that person isn't experiencing grief. And so ways that you could maybe pick up that that person is struggling is that you may notice an increase in stimming behaviours, that as I said, that person may be more irritable, more fidgety, may go off their foods and maybe restrict, if someone's on a restrictive diet, sometimes we struggle with avoiding restrictive food intake, where there's only certain foods that you can tolerate, and at a time like this when someone's grieving, they may stick to a safe food that that they're used to, and that there may be no deviation from that for a while. They want the routine, they want to keep it the same. What else? Yeah, so there might be, you might notice an increase in autistic traits such as sensory differences. So maybe noise sensitivity becomes increased, or light sensitivity, or touch. Maybe this person isn't able to tolerate as much as they normally can, or they're not able, or maybe this person would normally mask and try to suppress or their autistic traits, and maybe they find it very difficult to do that. Maybe if it's a friend and or a colleague and they're acting differently to you than you would normally know them to, that might be because of that they're struggling. So yeah, and that I've sort of gone around about, so I've sort of been talking as an autistic person but what I'm trying to say is that this is aimed at autistic people themselves who might say, oh yeah, I do that, or yeah, I found that, but also out there to holistic or neurotypical people that may not be aware of how an autistic person may be experiencing their grief. You may find that there are more difficulties with executive functioning, so planning and organising things, concentrating on tasks that would normally come easily to that person. That person may also have more meltdowns or shutdowns. Meltdowns are more of a outward expression. Usually it could be, again, it depends on the individual. That person may be quite snappy and irritable, quite, shout, snap at people, want to harm them, hit themselves, or break something or throw things or just want to get out of that situation. You know, or there are lots of ways that meltdowns could come about, but the main thing with meltdowns is that they are not a conscious, voluntary thing. It's a result of overstimulation, and you know there really isn't. And that person that has the meltdown isn't really in control of what they're saying or what they're doing, and so it's important to just give that person space, give them the time that they need to come around and to calm themselves. If you know what things help that person, like, you know, is it a weighted blanket? Is it fidget? Is it a dark room? Help that person in the way that you know helps them best. And just know that, you know, and meltdowns, whatever is said or done isn't personal. And meltdowns can be extremely tiring as well. So not only may that person be struggling with their grief and their loss, but may also be struggling with the aftermath of a meltdown, which is mentally and physically exhausting. There may be shutdowns where the person may lose the ability to speak, which would be very frustrating for the individual experiencing it, and also for people around that are trying to, you know, find out how they can help. But I know for myself, if I have a verbal shutdown, I cannot speak. I cannot find the words. I can't get them in the right order in my head and get them out there. And it's very difficult. It can be very difficult, very frustrating. So the autistic person that is going through this, the ways that you could help yourself is to, if you're able to talk to friends, talk to family about how you're feeling, but also ask them how they're feeling, how they're dealing with this loss as well. Maybe they've got some coping tips, or maybe just hearing how other people are feeling may help you to understand how you're feeling a bit better, which can sometimes help when you're thinking, you know, what am I doing? Why am I feeling like this? Is this normal? You know, is this what everyone else is feeling? So as much as possible, try and talk to friends and family about what they're experiencing and see how that, if that helps. Yeah, I'm going to throw it out to my colleague, to like Dawn and Niall and Lucy, because I just feel like I've just sort of blurted out quite a lot. So has anybody got any personal experiences or any like input, or, you know?
Well, thanks for that, Carrie. This is very interesting. And one of the points that you had said was that routine is very important, and I appreciate there's a wide spectrum for autism and how it affects people differently. But I was wondering, with something like routine, if that was something that is very important to encourage. You know, if we're speaking to some, you know, we don't always know if somebody has autism unless they actually tell us.
Yeah.
So obviously we have to remain very open-minded in any case. And I don't think anybody presenting necessarily, who, you know, a client presenting, if they had autism, that I don't necessarily know that we would perhaps pick up on that, certainly on a phone call. But if there's one, so I guess what I'm trying to say, if there's, is there one thing that you would sort of say to us, for example, if we are with, you know, supporting somebody with autism, that you would think would be our go-to to sort of encourage them to maintain routine? Obviously reassurance, I felt, was coming through there very strongly. You know, the need to sort of reassure that what they were experiencing was perfectly normal, and how they are perceiving their loss and their grief, that it's perfectly normal for them to be that way, whatever, you know, whatever that is. However they interpret their loss, and however that loss manifests, that there is a normality to that as well. But is there something that we should be looking more forefront in our minds to say, you know, it's important to keep a routine? because I don't know if that is necessarily something that we would specifically say to somebody else when we know that their routines have been thrown up in the air, if you like. They may not be so open to keeping to a routine when they're grieving. But I'm wondering if that's something that's important for somebody who's autistic, to encourage them to keep to the routine.
Yeah, I think again I think it's very much like individual, but I would have said that keeping to a normal routine as much as possible would give a sense of control over events that are out of our control, I suppose, or feel out of our control. And with a routine, you know what's coming next. So losing a companion, whether it was suddenly or you had a build up to it, obviously, you know, everything's changed. And so I feel that having a routine or sticking to normal routine as much as you can helps to regain a sense of, let's say, control and familiarity that, you know, okay, this unexpected thing happened, but we know that other things in that person's life are, you know, we can expect, they know what to expect and when. I suppose with regards to ourselves, it as, you know, pet bereavement counsellors, it's more of a how to, as you say, you know, when you're on the phone to a client or face to face with a client, unless they specifically say I'm autistic, you're not necessarily always going to know because you know, autism doesn't have a look, you know, there's um no features that necessarily say, oh, that person's autistic, or that person's not. So like I say, it can be difficult to know unless that person says so. But I was just reading on there was a really good blog from where was it now? It was on Psychology Today actually. It was called The Spectrum of Loss Grief Through the Autistic Lens, and it was written by Harry. I really hope I'm saying this right. Srinivasan. Um, and it's one of the bits I highlighted here said that autistics often thrive on sameness and routine, and grief and loss are the most disruptive of changes. The complexity of emotions surrounding grief may be amplified for autistics with increased social communication challenges and heightened sensory sensitivities. So again, you know, say losing a loved one is disruptive and devastating no matter your neurotype. But again, I feel that helping someone to regain control of what they can control, so for instance, say like routine would be beneficial. Also to just sort of bear in mind that how an autistic person may cope with the loss may be, it may seem not, I don't know, I hesitate to say like odd, or it might seem that I think if I just explain what I mean, and then so for instance, some autistics like such as myself, to cope with the death of a loved one or the build up to, um, would tend to look into all the facts and all the details around the death and what will happen. So, for instance, like euthanasia may find not a comfort as such, but by researching it and getting all the facts beforehand and knowing exactly what to expect really helps a lot of people. I know for some people, just knowing, as I said, just knowing what to expect, getting all of the, you know, so maybe somebody might ask questions about euthanasia, you know, do you know what happens? What happens after that? And well, why does that happen? And just so that we know what the process is and just know the why behind, you know, I for one am a great fan of knowing why something is the way it is or how something happens or works. And um, whereas others may feel that they don't want to know the ins and outs, they'd rather just know that you know, that euthanasia is going to take place or the pet has died. But for some people, they want to know the details because it helps to sort of get everything straight in their heads, I suppose. I know for, like I said, for myself, obviously, like I've suffered a bereavement recently, and in the weeks leading up to the loss of my loved one, I watched numerous videos and read numerous blogs on what was happening to my loved one, what, and more importantly, what were the next stages going to be, so that I was as prepared as I could be. So it wasn't as big of a shock when those things happened, and knowing that what happened was what had been written about, had been spoken about, and that actually helped me so much because I'd already seen it, I'd already read about it, I'd already heard about it. So when it actually happened, I was like, oh, right, okay, so this has happened. Now, the next thing to happen will be X, Y, or Z. And so in my case, that really helped when the time came for my loved one to pass, that I was like, okay, you know, I knew exactly what was going on. So for some people, knowing that may help, and others may feel that, you know, you don't need to know the details, or it's too much, it might be too upsetting. But sometimes it's more upsetting to not know what to expect and what's coming. So I think that's why it's so important that we're fully up to date on knowing about euthanasia techniques and the process, and how the drugs work on the central nervous system. You know, the process from start to finish. Just so that if a client does ask about it, we can talk them through it, and we have those answers, which may be quite helpful. Sorry, bear with me. Just saw a question, a comment, and I just thought I wanted to. So I'm just reading Celia's comment, saying that she's a qualified counsellor, registered veterinary nurse, and finds that many of her clients want to discuss and understand the euthanasia cremation process. I find again some comfort in understanding some of the detail. Some clients come before the decision is made, and others come following the death. Yeah, exactly. So I think you know, I think no matter who you are or your neurotype, knowing the details and what to expect can be very comforting in a way, because you know what to look out for, and you're prepared as much as you can be. But again, especially for an autistic person, where we can't really, I mean, I know for myself, I can't quite imagine what may happen, and I'm trying to fill in the blanks, and I may imagine fill in the blanks with something that's not going to happen, or and then something else happens, and then that just throws me off. So being up to date on procedures, and you know, can be very helpful. So if a client asks you, you know, what to expect, you're confident in what you're saying. Something else is that bear in mind is that as the grief you know, as the bereavement period like progresses, people might find that they thought they were doing okay, and then all of a sudden they're not, and they may wonder, you know, why am I feeling so strongly? Why am I struggling so much? And I feel that sometimes we can be so caught up in the facts and the I suppose almost putting on a brave face and just trying to, you know, looking at things in a detached way. You know, this is how it is, this is what I expected, this is just what happens. And then all of a sudden the emotional impact hits us. It's like, okay, so I knew what to expect and it's happened now, but emotionally, like mentally even, it's really impacted me. And you know, people may notice that they're struggling to concentrate, that they you know, finding it hard to talk to other people or relate to others or interact, and really struggling with day-to-day socializing, etc., and may not put it with the what they've experienced. So almost like the not mass was it master grief? So you don't associate the way you're behaving with the grief you've experienced, and it can be difficult to think, oh, I'm acting like I feel like this because of that. It can be hard to put the two together. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. So um, so I've got myself all confused now. I've got like so many notes, and I've got myself all.
No,
But
it's
yeah,
cover, Carrie. Thank you. I mean, it's great, and I know you put questions out. I don't know if Lucy earlier to us, and obviously I can forward. I don't know if Lucy or Niall's got a question
Yeah, I
for
just
you.
want to, I would like to ask a question because I've been looking over the last few days to see the differences, as you said at the start, between grief in a neurotypical person and an autistic person. And it didn't seem to me, I mean, you've explained it well now, but I didn't really find myself that there were massive differences because everybody experiences grief differently. So the fact that you have talked especially about the stimming now and maybe the, what do we call it, the meltdown, there's things probably that are specific more to autistic people, but I didn't, when I was looking at it myself, kind of figure out exactly what the differences between a normal person grieving and an autistic person grieving are. And if you were on a call with an autistic person, unless they specifically told you, which we've said, I don't think you wouldn't know this. And your advice might be different if you did know it. For example, you brought up there about creating a safe space, providing a comfortable environment, whether it be dark or whether it be somewhere without sensory overload. There are things you would say perhaps to an autistic person that you wouldn't necessarily say to somebody else. So, I just find it hard the fact that unless somebody tells you they're autistic, you're not going to give maybe the very, very specific advice that would be most helpful to that person. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment, but it's just something
yeah,
that I'm
yeah,
thinking. I just think I would never think of saying to someone, create a safe space necessarily, or to go into a dark room or a quiet corner where you can retreat and process your feelings. That's something that you would, if you knew the person was autistic, would be one of the foremost things you would say. It mightn't be a foremost thing if you weren't thinking in the autistic terms, perhaps. Do you
yeah.
see? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But then I suppose that if somebody was expressing that, I mean, for anybody really, autistic or not, if somebody was saying that, I'm really struggling with, everything just feels too much,
Mm.
there's no harm in making these suggestions to somebody that isn't autistic or that we don't know if they are or not. That, I think we can all benefit from downtime or doing something that doesn't require any thinking. So, whether it's journaling, colouring, like just sitting in a quiet room and just reducing sensory stimulation for a while. I suppose it can work I suppose anyone could benefit from it really.
I suppose it's
Although
going in with the open mind there, isn't it? I mean, if you don't
mm,
know whether a person is autistic or not, you're giving hints, you're giving suggestions that will help regardless of whether they're autistic or not. It's what you're saying. Basically, going into a
yeah,
quiet room where there's peace and quiet, or going out in nature
Yeah,
where there's peace and quiet will help everybody regardless. So you're not making an
yeah,
assumption either way that the person is autistic or isn't autistic.
yeah, yeah. I think that if it was sort of a broad, like, well, maybe you may try this or try that, um and it's, I mean, some people may find comfort in, like, say, colouring or journaling or listening to music or a darkened room and just no other stimulation. Others may find that they need the noise, they need the light, and they need other people around. And so I suppose it depends on like the individual, but I suppose You know, just having idea, you know, so things that are not specifically neurodivergent tips, but more of a just a toolbox of things, you know, that you could try, that you don't have to be autistic to do these things, and they may help. But I suppose it's the reduction in stimulation and you know, let's see, what was it? Another blog or article that I was reading was from the Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, and I've printed off some of this one because it was really interesting. It's called Autistic Grief is Not Like Neurotypical Grief by Carla Fisher. And there's some brilliant things in here. So, for instance, they were saying that for therapists, they've said that they felt it would be very beneficial for therapists as a first step, could all help autistic clients in their care to understand how the act of processing emotions actually impacts other brain functions, and how autistic symptoms will increase for some time. And then, you know, they say spend time troubleshooting the failures by category, and also becoming aware of the symptoms that cause anxiety, for instance. So I really like that, because I thought that, you know, again, as I said before, you know, if a person is really struggling, they may not realise that the reason they're struggling with day-to-day tasks or communication or things that they would normally find easy to do, maybe, you know, because they're grieving. But I think as therapists, we can work together to, you know, validate and normalize what that person's going through. And if we can work out together, okay, so put the pieces together. So, you know, this has happened, struggling with this, and, you know, try and piece together that, oh, that might be connected to that. And okay, so now we've figured that out. More importantly, what can we do? And working together with the client, we find out, you know, what work. I suppose it's also asking the client, you know, what works for you, what you know, yeah, you know, I think it's difficult because like I said, like, obviously I'm autistic, and so and I'm living this, you know, I'm living this bereavement period, and so I'm finding a lot of skill regression, like myself. Like, for instance, you know, I've printed out all like the information because I just couldn't write down notes. I just could not condense them into notes. I just highlighted bits, and I just thought, yeah, you know, I'll be fine. It'll be all right. I'll just highlight the bits and it'll be all good. And then you find that you're struggling a bit, and so, like I say, you're not always going to know that your client is autistic, and you know, like I say, unless they tell you. But I think all we can do is just, I suppose, like what we usually do is to, you know, we see the person as an individual. We don't assume anything. We don't say, you know, oh well, you know, as we all know with like grief and bereavement counselling, there's no one size fits all to this, and we know that everyone is an individual, and as they grief as individual as they are. Sorry, bear with me. I'll just have a. I'm just looking at the notes. So, sorry if it's Katerina or Katharina. He said maybe it's a good idea to explore self-care and self-soothing ideas with clients and what this might look like for them. Exactly. Always work, like, obviously, as we do, work with the person. And again, you know, every autistic person is different. Some people like deep pressure when they're overstimulated. So you could suggest things like a weighted blanket, even just getting someone to give them a tight hug. Whereas others, like such as myself, if I'm overstimulated, I cannot stand to be touched. So suggesting, say if I was a client, suggesting to me, you know, oh, you know, just get someone to give you a squeeze, and I'd be like, that would just make me melt down. I couldn't. Or particularly like fidgets, the stim toys. So looking into things like olfactory, tactile, visual stimulations, you know, and if you're doing a face-to-face and someone's struggling, you could have a selection of fidgets and stim toys that someone could use in the session. So tangles, like, you know, so I've got, well, got loads here, like, you know, oh, can't really say because it's blue. Tangles, stress balls, you know, so, you know, certain scents maybe soothing to that person, certain textures. Some textures may be really soothing and others just steer clear of, like, you know, microfiber, velvet, corduroy, things like that may be soothing to someone but not to others. So I'd say working with the client and, you know, work, I suppose if the client says actually, yeah, you know, guiding that client through and saying, okay, what sort of things normally help you to regulate yourself, and you know, as a therapist, you could write those down and print them off and give them to the client, and you know, whatever the client has said. So maybe they say, you know, I need to be, you know, I need this, or I don't want that, and then formulate a plan together. Let's see, I'll just have a look at the Denise said safe space will reduce the chance for meltdown and send the individual can focus fully on the counter session. Yeah. I mean, it's about obviously working with that individual, what works for them. But I suppose if you're doing it together as the therapist, you could condense it, or you could put things down in order, as the client's telling you what works and what doesn't. And then, you know, like I say, you could type it up and email it over to that person or give it to them in the session, because you've taken on board what they've said and you've put it into order, which may help that person. It's like, all right, okay, so together we've come up with this care plan where if I'm feeling X, then we've said that try Y because that may help. If Y doesn't help, try Z. And together you can maybe come up with a care plan, say, okay, this works for you in this circumstance. If that doesn't work, we could try this or we could try that. And obviously working with that person, and obviously we don't know what would work for that person necessarily, only, you know, they do, but together maybe we can, as I say, formulate a plan and help that person. So yeah, like, so for instance, other coping techniques, you know, stimming is a really good way of self-soothing and regulating. Listening to music, drawing, walking, indulging in favourite hobbies, or just any calming activity that a person finds, you know, helpful. Yeah. So sorry, is anyone else?
No, I was just thinking, Carrie. It's fascinating. It's fascinating, but I think what I'm taking away from this is that I think we're almost crossing over. I'm looking at the comments that are coming up, and you know, that I think we need to get back to, we are providing pet bereavement support and we are specialists in that field. And I think when we then, I think we have to be aware of a whole manner of conditions that people may have. And a lot, well, certainly speaking for myself, as I've said many times before, I'm based in Scotland. The majority of my clients are from the south coast of England. I can count in one hand how many in-person sessions I've actually had with regards to pet bereavement. Pet bereavement, we don't tend to have a lot of in-person sessions. It's certainly not been my experience. A lot of that is because people are looking for the help very quickly. they don't want to wait, they don't want to be waiting to book appointment for, they don't want to travel, they want the help there and then. And I think that's where pet bereavement differs from some of the counselling. So I think when we define safe space, that safe space can be defined on the phone as well as in person. But in person, I think if we were to start introducing, I think our focus at all times needs to remain on the fact that people have contacted us because of the loss of their pets. And I'm wondering, how far do we go before we are crossing the line to start overthinking, just to the extent of, you know, we offer a safe space for all our clients. But I wonder where we start crossing the line in a pet bereavement session, that we start really introducing, yeah, sure. I mean, obviously the lighting will be dimmer, but that would be the case for all our clients, lack of interruptions, etc. And I'm just sort of wondering where to ensure that we're not here almost getting the two, you know, sort of mixed up, where somebody who specialises in pet bereavement is then over-analysing a client who comes along and says they're autism. I mean, for me, if a client comes along, which I've had many of, who have said they have explained to me they were autistic, and I have asked them if, you know, what considerations that I should be looking for, and they've said, oh, nothing. Just do, you know, it's, I'm here about my pet. So I think, you know, where counsellors may be approaching it from a different situation, more in person, etc., where somebody who specialises in pet bereavement support may be coming at it from a different, you know, perspective, from the point of view that most of either online, email, telephone, and in person's quite far down the line for us, and would we be crossing or, you know, sort of overstepping our limitations to start over-analysing the potential of somebody with autism, and how we can. The reason I'm sort of going down this route, Carrie, is because I had a lovely counsellor contact me last week there, who had a client who had specific issues, shall we say, and the issues that the client brought to the session was overshadowing the whole reason that they had come to that counsellor. They come to that counsellor for pet bereavement support, and all of a sudden the hour had gone off in a completely different tangent and focused purely on the issues that that particular client had, and pet bereavement wasn't even discussed. So they were asking me how they could bring it back into line, or should they go down that route and focus on that? And I think it depends ultimately what your client has come to you for. And I think if they've come to you for pet bereavement support, we are certainly all the accredited members that I know, who I can 100% guarantee that they offer, like yourself, Carrie, who's a very learned with when it comes to pet bereavement, and having the additional understanding of autism is absolutely fantastic. And I'm wondering if it's the people who perhaps some of the autism charities, whatever, that are out there, that if we reach out to them and say, listen, if they're looking for pet bereavement support, ask them to tell whoever they're speaking to, whether it's a counsellor, pet bereavement specialist, that they are autistic, and explain what their, you know, if they have special requirements, and that will be obviously seen to. Because if somebody, you know, from contacts me and explains, and maybe if they sort of say, look, one of the triggers is I need to have a very quiet, darkened room, maybe the facility I have here is not going to be ideal, because although I can keep the lighting low, there's a huge picture window out there. where there may be noise. I mean, there's blinds, but there may be noise, there may be traffic noise. So to what degree would somebody be affected? So I just think we, you know, for us as pet bereavement specialists or counsellors, we need to keep within our limitations and not cross over. But I think understanding the nuances of all our clients is absolutely fascinating, especially to hear it from somebody like yourself who's so much experience in pet bereavement, who, you know, and there's nobody can tell you anything about pet bereavement, Carrie, and to hear you speak, you know, about those struggles that people with autism have that we might not take into consideration is really interesting, really interesting. I saw I was aware that there was messages going up.
It's out because well, I suppose like one of the traits of one of my traits is that I do tend to I don't know, either go off on a tangent or I can have my understanding of something and then it's completely different to what was meant, sort of thing. So I know I think someone was saying that, you know, they thought that sorry, Denise thought it's when the counselling goes in the direction of counselling client for the things that help will need to draw. Yeah, I think in my roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is that when we're talking about grief and in this and particularly pet loss, is that an autistic person will or may present in way that we don't expect. Maybe like I said, maybe they want to know the full details of the euthanasia, how it works, how do the drugs work, how does the process work. Maybe I had a client a while ago that, you know, we were sort of going down the memory lane almost. And that, and for some clients that works, you know, they just want to revisit those moments. Whereas for others, they don't want to think about that. They just want to focus on like the here and now. And so bearing in mind what that the person, you know, like I said, on the phone or online, you know, that person is, you know, obviously is struggling. They've come to, you know, and they've gone through a major upheaval, major disruption. And I suppose really when you look at grief, you think, well, you know, that it doesn't sound any different how an autistic person may experience grief to how someone else would. But I think it's just helping that person to, whereas a neurotypical person may say, oh, I'm feeling X, Y, Z, and I know that I'm feeling this, and I know why I'm feeling like this, and I can help myself with that. Somebody that's autistic may not have a name for how they're feeling. They may just know that they feel dysregulated, they feel a bit, you know, out of sorts, or they're really struggling to communicate. And so that's why I think things like the emotion behavior wheel and the sensations wheel are really good, because you know, I mean, even if you're on like online, you could share, you know, if you've got it on a screen, you share a screen, and it's just something just to help someone to, you know, like for instance, where was it now? So for instance, on like say on this behavior wheel, someone's feeling sad and then it's broken down into apathetic, despair, depressed and lonely. And then that's broken down further into what they mean. And so, you know, even just helping someone to name the feelings, or even, you know, you may have someone that wants to know what other people may have gone through, may be feeling. And I know I would say grief is as individual as a person experiencing it, but, you know, helping that person to recognize that, yeah, you know, what you, and as we do with any client really, is validating what they're feeling, and that, you know, that it feels scary, it feels intense, but you know, and we're helping that person through that. We're talking them through, giving them tools to cope, and
Have you
and
got any websites or you know, resources that you would point people towards to understand a wee bit more about autism and how it affects
yeah,
individuals?
I think what I will do is I will give this autistic grief, this blog that I'd read, autistic grief is not like neurotypical grief. I felt was really, really good, because although the author is talking about a human loss, I really felt that the explanation of how they were feeling and why, and what they're looking for in a therapist or how to help was, you know, was really good. I felt it was quite concise. So I think if I bear with me, I'm gonna
Katharina's asking if you've got any links to the sensations, behaviour, emotions wheel.
Yeah, I shall get the name of the creator of it, because I really, honestly, I love it. As an autistic person as well, honestly, it's brilliant. The emotion sensation wheel is brilliant. Like, so for instance, it goes into so I mean, like, you can't really see it because it's blurred, but so for instance, if someone, you know, so for sad, it's broken down into despair, depressed, lonely, apathetic, and then that's broken down further into crying, body aches, tiredness, hollow feeling, slow, heaviness, feeling weak. And I like that further breakdown. So like for me personally, it's like, well, I could say I'm just feeling really hollow, I'm feeling really tired, and they say, okay, well, you know, we can associate that with this, and you know what I mean? It just further, I just think it's great, like descriptor, especially for people that struggle with like alexithymia, where you just can't name, you know, how you're feeling. So I'll just pop in, I don't know if I can write it in the chat. Or,
You can put it in the chat. I'll read another one. So Denise,
yeah.
thank you for your comments. So Denise is saying, led to believe that some dogs, maybe cats, but I don't know, show autistic traits? Question mark. I thought that that's what this session was going to be about. So I don't know if that's what you mean. It's about the pets being autistic, showing autistic traits. Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
How do we know? I'm not a behaviourist. I don't know how I would. Sometimes my pets just have a mad 5 minutes. And all the years I've had companion animals, but then maybe I wouldn't know how to identify. I suppose our companion animals, they suffer all the same physical ailments, so I don't see why they, you know, they obviously have a lot of certainly emotional ailments as well, that they deal with. My own office companion, who was trying to disrupt the start of the webinar tonight because it was her birthday, you know, she's very timid, very timid by nature, and she needs her own space, and she's quite happy to be in here, whereas, you know, for example, my other dog is not. So their personalities, very much, I understand their personalities. Would I understand it would I identify that they were autistic if they were? I don't know. I don't know what I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I couldn't say, to be honest. But yeah, it's like I say, it's tricky, because like I said, you know, I can only speak like, if I'm speaking of the autistic experience of grief, I can only speak for how I have felt. But like I said, I've looked at some of these blogs where fellow autistic people have expressed how they felt, and And like I said, you know, when you look at grief, how an autistic person experiences it and how a neurotypical person or a holistic person experiences it, you might think, yeah, there's not really any difference. But to the autistic person, there may be subtle differences where it's not so much that they're experiencing it differently, they may experience it more intensely, or or they may not just be able to verbalize how they're feeling, and you know,
The way they do.
or you know, they may be feeling a certain way, and just not know it's because of the grief, or not know how to say, actually, you know, because I mean, I know for myself, unless someone points out to me that I'm behaving differently, or I seem different, you know, I'm acting out of sort of thing, I wouldn't necessarily. I'd feel it, but I wouldn't necessarily know. It's almost like I don't realize other people are aware, you know, or it's a tricky one, really. So the blog that I found really useful was Autistic Grief is Not Like Neurotypical Grief by Carla Fisher, and that's Carla with a K, Karla,
Autistic grief.
Carla
Yes,
Fisher.
it's come up in the, yeah.
And the wheel, the emotion sensation wheel and the emotion behavior wheel, I got off Etsy. And the person who created it was Lindsay, Lindsay Brahman, Braman. And you have to pay a small fee for the license, but you can print these off. I've just got a copy of each slide just for personal use, but you can buy a license, so that if you do face-to-face sessions, or if you did want to email it over to a client to assist them during a session with you, then you know, you buy that license. But I mean, I think you know, like I said, you know, it's bearing in mind that someone has lost a beloved companion, and maybe this companion that they had was maybe a therapy animal or emotional assistance. And so we have to bear that in mind as well, that not only is that person experiencing the loss of their 24/7 companion, but also the secondary losses. So the emotional support, the confidence and safety going out, you know, out and about, that pet may have given that person more independence. And so we have to think about the secondary losses as well, which can also affect the person, no matter who they are really, but from a sensory point of view, you know, it can heighten or increase autistic traits that person may have, you know, gotten used to or been able to manage, and maybe find it quite difficult.
I was just going to say a big thank you to everybody that's contributed, and yeah, Denise, I think Denise has come up with a whole new topic for our next webinar. She has a friend whose dog is autistic, and I would love to hear more about that. And just before you do wrap, Carrie, I would just like to say thank you very much to you for hosting tonight. We know, as you said earlier, that you're going through a period of bereavement yourself, so it's even really appreciated that you've come along tonight to speak to us. It's really appreciated, and of course everybody who has you know, joined us tonight live. We will be putting the recording on YouTube, and we hope if anybody is watching on YouTube, if you can hit the subscribe button and like it, and tell your friends and invite all your friends to come along. And hopefully I'll catch up with some of the people who have joined us tonight at a later date. I'd just like to thank Lucy very much for joining us, and you too, Carrie. And Carrie, if anybody has any questions or would like to speak to you specifically about autism and how it affects, you know, people in general, if you want to take the discussion further, can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Yeah, no problem at all. like I said, I'm not an expert on autism, or I'm an expert on my autism,
Yeah.
but I can't. So what I've said is partly personal experience, but also from what I've read and general, what interactions with clients over the years. So I'm happy to talk about what I know and what I've experienced, and if that helps, that's great. And I mean, I'm always open to learning. Thank you so much to everyone that's attended. It's, I feel like I've probably gone off a bit, like I've had a tangent in parts and I've waffled a bit. So, I feel that this has been a very like autistic webinar today. I've really,
You get the real deal here, Carrie.
Oh,
The
honestly,
real deal.
this is me.
Bells
I am
and whistles.
completely unmasked.
It was very natural, Carrie. It was
this
excellent,
is me.
actually. Very good.
Thank you, Lucy. So yeah, this is me in all my autistic glory. I'm not masking. This is how clients see me as well, by the way. This is how I am with clients.
But also,
I am
Carrie, you are one of the best pet bereavement specialists in the country.
Dawn.
Your knowledge and understanding and experience is second to none, and there's not many out there can match your knowledge and experience. It was a great webinar. Thank you so much, Carrie, for coming along tonight and speaking to us. And I'm sure everybody will take a lot away from tonight. And I hope that if anybody would like to get in touch with Carrie to speak about autism and pet bereavement support, and how Carrie finds it as a counsellor, and how she finds it from her personal experience dealing with grief. I'm sure Carrie would be delighted to speak to you, and I'm sure she'll fit you in at the earliest possible chance because she's got a lot on. Very, very busy person. But yeah, thanks a million, Carrie, for everything. It was really appreciated. And thank you to everyone else.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for listening and for joining, and I really hope you can take something from it. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Right.